right, we've got a fascinating pairing for this deep dive. All the President's Men and Wall Street talk about power and politics, but in totally different worlds, huh?
Yeah, one's digging into journalism and investigations, the other's all about that high-stakes world of finance. Should be interesting to see what we find when we compare them.
You know, it's wild to think both of these films are actually rooted in, like, real-world events. All the President's Men throws us right into the Watergate scandal. We're basically right there with Woodward and Bernstein, uncovering this huge conspiracy.
But it doesn't go for that, like, typical Hollywood thriller vibe, does it?
No, not at all.
It's really intentional about not being sensationalized. It's more about showing the nitty-gritty work of investigative journalism, like building those relationships with sources, making sure every single detail checks out, hitting all those dead ends. It's all done in this, like, really understated way.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they even highlight these little details that seem almost mundane at first. There's that scene where Woodward and Bernstein are arguing about whose article is better. Seems kind of trivial, but it shows how much emphasis they put on being precise, especially when the stakes are so high.
Exactly. That dedication to getting things right is absolutely crucial, especially when you've got powerful people who are actively trying to bury the truth. The film really hammers home how tough it is to hold those in power accountable, but also how important it is.
It's like a constant reminder of all the obstacles they're up against, right? Hidden agendas, everyone's paranoid. It's no surprise they had to rely on someone like Deep Throat, meeting in the shadows, just getting bits of information here and there.
Yeah, keeping Deep Throat shrouded in that secrecy adds to how real it all feels. You realize the risks people take to expose corruption, whistleblowers putting themselves out there. It's this constant reminder that going against the grain can be dangerous.
It's almost poetic how Nixon himself never actually shows up on screen. We hear his voice in recordings and stuff, but he's always this looming presence, almost like a myth.
That's such a smart choice by the director, by keeping the focus on the journalists and what they're going through. The film really emphasizes the power of doing that meticulous investigation, rather than just getting caught up in the drama of the scandal itself.
And then we switch gears to Wall Street. It's like stepping into a whole other universe, right? This fast-paced, almost surreal portrayal of finance. And then there's Gordon Gekko, this corporate raider who just oozes that 80s excess.
Totally. And unlike that subtle way power is shown in All the President's Men, Wall Street just throws it right in your face.
Yeah.
Gekko's not just greedy, he's practically a poster boy for it. That whole greed is good speech, it became iconic, didn't it? Even if it sparked a lot of debate about ethics and business.
It's like he boils down these really complex economic and moral issues into this catchy phrase, right?
Absolutely. The film uses Gekko as this larger-than-life villain. He's flaunting his wealth, manipulating the stock market, almost like a caricature, That scene where he's bragging about his latest win while walking on the beach. That's just perfect for showing how over-the-top and almost cartoonish that world of finance can be with all its excesses.
But is it really that far-fetched? I mean, do you think the film, even though it's trying to critique this whole greed thing, maybe actually ended up making Gekko and his ruthlessness look glamorous in a way?
Yeah.
After all, his character and that line had become pretty iconic.
That's a really good point. It does make you think about the power of charisma, right? And how the media can shape what people think, even when it's trying to warn them about something. I guess the line between criticizing something and accidentally glorifying it can get blurry, especially when you've got a character as compelling as Gekko.
So here we have two films, both dealing with power and ambition, but taking such different approaches, using completely different styles and characters. It really makes you think about which one is more effective in getting its message across, and how they impact the audience.
It is fascinating, isn't it? All the President's Men chooses that quiet, realistic style, focusing on integrity and not giving up, while Wall Street goes for this more exaggerated, almost operatic style to show the dangers of letting ambition run wild. Each has its strength. But it's worth thinking about how those choices affect how viewers understand these complicated issues. I think it's worth really looking at how these films use their characters to get their points across. It's not just about what happens, but who we're following and how they embody these bigger themes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's like each character gives us a different lens to see these worlds through.
Exactly. And All the President's Men, you've got Woodward and Bernstein. They're like the definition of dedicated, hardworking journalists full of integrity. They're not glamorous or flashy. They're just regular guys doing this extraordinary job.
And that makes them so easy to connect with, right?
Yeah.
It really drives home the point that finding the truth isn't always about those dramatic showdowns. It's about the meticulous, sometimes even boring work.
Exactly. Their ordinariness actually makes the message stronger. It's not about being some kind of superhero. It's about that everyday grind of holding powerful people accountable, which is pretty inspiring considering all the pushback and threats they're facing.
You mentioned Deep Throat earlier. What do you make of the fact that he only ever meets them in parking garages, always hidden in the dark?
I think that visual choice really emphasizes the whole secrecy thing and how risky it is to challenge those powerful institutions. Deep Throat being anonymous, it reminds us that speaking truth to power can be dangerous, and the
Mm.
people who do it often have to stay hidden.
It's a stark contrast to how power is just on display in Wall Street. Gordon Gekko isn't just greedy, he's like a caricature of greed. He's flamboyant, arrogant, and totally unapologetic about wanting to be rich.
Yeah, he's almost like a comic book villain come to life, with the slicked back hair, the expensive suits, that look in his eyes. But that serves a purpose, right? It highlights how seductive power can be and how easily it can corrupt people.
It is interesting, though, how even though he's the bad guy, Gekko has become this, like, iconic figure. Some people even see him as someone to aspire to.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how the line between criticizing something and accidentally making it look cool can get really blurry.
Oh, definitely. It shows how complex people are. Even when we know what he's doing is wrong, there's still a part of us that's drawn to his boldness and how he manipulates the system.
So we see two very different ways characters act within these systems of power. One's subtle, the other's over the top. I wonder which approach really sticks with people and makes them think more deeply.
That's the question, isn't it? All the President's Men might inspire people with its focus on integrity and never giving up, while Wall Street grabs your attention with these larger-than-life characters and tons of drama. But in the end, the real impact comes from how those portrayals make viewers think about power dynamics in their own lives.
It seems like both films, even though they have such different styles, ultimately challenge us to think critically about the systems that control our world and the people within those systems.
Absolutely. And that's where their real power lies, I think. They don't give us easy answers, but they make us want to talk about these complex issues and look at our own relationship with power, ambition, and what it means to be successful.
So we've covered different styles, different worlds, and the characters who live in them. What's the main takeaway? How do these films, when you look at them together, speak to the bigger political landscape, both back then and now? So we've really gone deep on these contrasting film takes on the whole idea of politics, right? One's all about journalistic integrity. The other dives headfirst into greed and excess. What do you think we can take away from looking at them side by side?
Well, I think the big takeaway here is how movies can shape the way we understand these complex political and social issues. Those storytelling choices, the structure, the characters, the tone, they can have a huge impact on how we see things.
It's almost like they're holding up this mirror to society, giving us back a version of truth that could be clearer or maybe even more distorted, depending on what the filmmaker was going for.
Yeah, that's it. And that's why it's so important for us as viewers to be aware of those choices, to really think critically about what we're watching, knowing that even when something seems objective, it's still a story someone's crafted.
So, thinking about how these films show us politics and finance, do you think they still speak to us today? I mean, have things really changed all that much? Or are we still dealing with the same problems of corruption, greed, people abusing their power?
Ooh, now that's the big question. And honestly, I'm going to leave that one with you to think about. Take a look at how power works in the systems you're a part of at work, in your community, out in the world. Are those echoes of Watergate and Wall Street still there? Have we actually learned anything from what happened? Or are those same issues, maybe dressed up a bit differently, still lurking around?
It's a bit of a heavy thought, but it's important to consider. And I think that's the real power these films have, right? They get us talking, challenge what we think we know, and encourage us to dig deeper into these issues.
They remind us that finding the truth, whether it's in journalism or the world of finance, is never really finished. It's something we have to constantly be working at. It takes being aware, thinking critically, and being willing to stand up to those in power.
That's a great point to wrap things up on. I hope this deep dive has made you want to go back and watch these films again, but also to seek out other movies that deal with political themes. Pay attention to how the filmmakers shape your understanding of these complex issues that never seem to go away. Thanks for joining us for this conversation.